We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast focused on sharing insights to help those working in cybersecurity companies, be them technology or services. Each session, your host, Will Klusovsky, aka Will Clue, sits down with professionals in our industry to illuminate topics that will help your security biz, team, or self be better. Let's hack into it now. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. Welcome to another exciting episode. Today, we are joined by Jen. I got another founder slash executive to chat with you guys. So, Jen, give you 20, 30 seconds to tell us who you are and why we care.
Hey everyone, I'm Jen Greulich. I'm co-founder and COO of Legato Security, a managed security services firm, and I have 20 years of experience in the cybersecurity industry. I have owned and operated cybersecurity departments, used many tools on the market, and have troubleshot about every problem there is out there to have. So I'm excited to talk to everybody today about my experiences and what I've seen.
That's outstanding. I like the troubleshoot just about everything that happened, which is cool because relevant for the topic today. So we're talking about, a false sense of security that organizations get from thanks to all the tools is kind of how we look at it, right? So I guess when I think of that, I'll ask you to kind of tell me, like, what do you think of? What do you mean when you say there's a false sense of security? And how do you correlate to the tools to kind of making that the case and causing that influence?
Sure. We all have our check boxes we have to meet, right? Firewall, check. Endpoint protection software, check. MDM, all of the tools that we need to have in our environment. There's only so much an actual human can do in order to catch threats, perform anything within your environment. So we have to have the tools. And a lot of companies are led to believe that if they buy this tool, their environment will be secure. It will do everything for you. Or you have to make sure you have this and that, and then you're going to be secure. But the problem is these tools need to be configured. You still have to have the human element in order to know your tools are operating effectively. I can use an example from sort of my previous life when I was running a cybersecurity team. And that was, we had a separate infrastructure, IT, and firewall team. And it seemed like an everyday occurrence that we would see a change in the firewall configurations where our firewall expert was adding any rules to troubleshoot things for a server admin. So, as company leadership, you think, I have a firewall, we're fully protected, we're great. And we won't even talk about what COVID did to that concept right now. But, we had to have humans seeing, hey, this an unsecure rule was added. Now we're not secure. Even if they were troubleshooting, there had to be processes and policies in place to go back to ensure that was removed or re-protected. And that's the same with endpoint protection tools. There's so much AI within the industry now, and AI means something different to different companies, to different people. And so a lot of people think, as long as this machine learning is configured, then I don't have to do anything with my tool. And that's the largest problem with relying solely on tools right now is optimization of those tools still need to occur. Updates aren't necessarily automatic. A lot of the time when you automate updates, you're breaking your environment, right? Remember what happened last year with CrowdStrike? They just need the human element in order to know that working with one another and just effectively as a whole.
Yeah, it's super interesting, I think, because like you mentioned, like I always talk people, processes, and technology, and lots of really great examples about how, buying the tool isn't going to solve the problem. I think a lot of us in security know that, but the clients don't often know that, which is also, like, I know now we're going to start to see MFA by default, but that's also a byproduct of what you said, which is like, well, I have, this identity access management tool in place, so everything's taken care of, right? I'm not going to bother to configure it and actually look at how it works. I'm just going to buy it and plug it in. So right. If we think about that as this kind of working in the in the space where, our job is to help those building those programs and running those programs, like what do we need to, like what kind of traps do we tend to fall in on the services side or even the technology side that we need to be aware of to make sure that our clients aren't taking this false sense of security, that we're actually doing them justice?
Sure. I think that with the tools that are in the environment, your services company or your internal security team needs to perform regular configuration checks. A lot of teams overlook health checks. They think of them as that's extra work. I don't have time to do it. I'll get around to it. But really, that's where you can identify where things aren't right. One of your team members changed something back, 6 months ago in order to fix an issue, right? And you have to verify that your tools are still configured properly. You mentioned MFA, and of course, we all know now that MFA is absolutely necessary. But when you have users in any environment, they're going to have problems with MFA. Even if you're using tokenized, YubiKey type MFAs, you're going to have a user one day that calls and says it's not working. And so an IT admin turns off MFA for that person to get them into their accounts, right? Was there checks and balances to get that turned back on and to troubleshoot it to make sure that user can now log in effectively? And additionally, there are still SaaS products out there that charge you extra to have MFA. We have to put a stop to that. That's something I feel super passionate about. We should never have to pay extra to have security in our environments.
100%.
It should come by default. And I could name all the big names. They all do it. But we can't fully be effective if we are forcing companies to choose whether they can budget for the extra fees to be more secure, because you end up having companies say, well, I guess we can't do that because we don't have the budget. So, that's something that your services company can help you navigate as well if you're using one.
Right. Yeah, that to me is just ridiculous. Like so many companies, for whatever, I'm trying to be be nice about this. So many companies will get their SOC 2 because they know they have to, right? Because it
Right.
gets them to the table. And MFA shouldn't be that way. It seems like it should be table stakes also. Like you said, you shouldn't have to pay extra to get it. Like there's all these other things you're paying extra for. But it's also funny because it takes me back to my old MSSP days, where like change control was a big deal, right? You don't make changes. That admin can't make changes to the firewall, and to throw more problems on the fire, there's tools that can also watch and report on this and say, hey, did you know that somebody just added an any rule to your environment now? And I still see lots of organizations and clients that don't have that change control in place. They don't understand that before you make a change to the environments, people need to know about it, what's going on. And I've seen the opposite, which in a very good way. Like I've had to submit Jira tickets to like post a blog. And I'm like, well, I have to do this. Well, you're changing the website. Okay, I get it. All right, that's fine. That's what's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, change control is incredibly important. And it's another one of those things that most IT professionals find to be an added frustration to their day. But I have made changes as an engineer that went terribly, terribly wrong. If I'd have followed change control myself, we could have caught some of those issues before they happened. And it's for those changes, hey, sometimes we make a change, everything goes right, it worked perfectly, nobody knew you even made a change. It's for those that are going to cause major outages, major security gaps, or cause operational issues that you have to have change control for, but you can't know beforehand which of those are going to happen. So change control is important for every process. And if you are working with a services company, a good services company will insist on change control. If you don't have change
100%.
control within your organization, they will help you establish that process. It protects you, it protects them. And if you are going for any sort of compliance, you're going to have to prove that you're following change control procedures as well. But it's incredibly important now more so than ever with the security ramifications of changes being made in the systems, like adding an any rule, right? That's something that you can still narrow it down. You can use it for troubleshooting, but if you're following change control, you're troubleshooting it and then turning it back off, right?
Right.
Okay, now we know it's the firewall causing the problem. Now we need to find out what rule we need to update that isn't any rule within your firewall.
Right. It's that same, like, we're going to give you temporary admin access so we can try and fix this thing. And that's really the problem
Exactly.
behind it all is if you can have the best intent, but you may forget about that. Like I've had organizations where I've got initially set up and, we're trying to use the SSO and it's not working. And they're like, all right, we're just going to turn
Mm-hmm.
SSO off for you and
Yeah.
you'll just log in. It's like, okay. And then does it ever get put back the way it should be? Right. Same thing with
Right.
access controls.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to do those things to troubleshoot, right? IT systems are always going to have an issue with one thing or another, especially when you're using a multitude of tools, as we're talking about, and those tools need to work in an interconnected way. They need to improve the efficiency of your organization, improve your protections without halting productivity. And so it's a fine balance sometimes. And that's why often, relying just on tools, it really is doing yourself a disservice because your people have to make sure, are you still checking all of the boxes in your processes? Are these tools working? As I said before, there's optimization that needs to be done in every tool. It doesn't matter what tool it is, they don't come out of the box doing 100% of what you want them to do.
Really?
And
No.
I know, and I see all the time too tools that have been partially implemented.
Oh,
I hear constantly, oh, I know we're not using all the features. I know we're not doing everything we can do with this tool, but sometime in the process, we've had to move on to other things. So companies frequently need a lot of help in order to, fully utilize the tools they're paying for.
yeah. I'm a big proponent of programs, not projects, with everything that I advise on. And data protections, just for me, it's a common one. Like you mentioned, almost every company has one of those that's been in place and only using 20% of the capability. It's also the one that gets unplugged all the time because it has bad user experience, right? Because they
Right.
didn't do the organizational change management that they should to realize, hey, this is going to impact everybody's life. And that idea of, okay, before you do something, like, let's think about this. Like, how are we going to implement it? How are we going to manage it? And then, like, you've got to staff it. It's not just a one-time project. Somebody's got to manage it and be
Mm-hmm.
there to take care of the care and feeding. And then you got to come back every year, every 6 months, whatever your periodic thing, and actually review it. Like you said, do those health checks, right?
Absolutely. And service providers can really help in that area. Many service providers stay away from tool management. There's a lot of liability you take on
Yeah.
when you're asking a third party to manage your tools. But there are service providers out there who will help you holistically protect your program. As you said, they'll do care and feeding of your tools. They'll implement them fully, make sure you're using all functionality, or if the tools are not doing you any favors, they'll help you find something that works better. And they will do ongoing management, administration, monitoring. Those tools are generating data. That's if you don't have somebody responding to the data coming out of those tools, like alerts, like
Yep.
events, incidents, you're still not getting protected by your tools then. If you're, do you even know whether your tool is in detection mode or prevention mode, right? And what are you doing about that information? So, so many companies need help, and I've worked with tons of companies that have internal cybersecurity teams. They've got things locked down. They're security focused, and they handle everything in house, and that's great. But that's the exception
Yeah.
because most
Cheers.
companies don't have the kind of budget they need to have a full 24/7 security operations team internally.
For sure. Yeah. And it's like, for those on the services side of the house, it's a very not easy, but like, these organizations, when they're looking to implement this new tool or whatever, like I think at least one of the best things we can do is offer them that program management around the
Mm-hmm.
tooling and technology, because you may be giving them a tool and like, okay, this is going to require a quarter of an FTE. And
Right.
well, that's great. I've already got all my FTEs that are 120% utilized here at my, at the company, and I can't afford to hire another one. Well, the services providers can almost always do it cheaper. Like I tend to agree with
Sure.
you. I think I'm a big proponent of, unless you are, JP Morgan or Bank of America or like some huge, and even some of them don't do it themselves, but unless you have the financial backing to be able to build your own SOC and staff it with people 24/7 and look at alerts. I mean, Target's the example, right? Like, hey, the thing's
Yeah.
beeping like crazy. You need to check this out. We don't have enough staff to do that. So it doesn't matter that the tools they're getting the data if nobody looks at it to make a decision.
That's funny. The Target breach is a perfect example of what alert fatigue does.
Yes.
The breach was there. It was alerting. They could have known about it, but it was buried amongst thousands of other alerts, where they said, I see that all the time, moving on, looking at something else. So yeah, Target's a great example to bring
Yeah.
up.
And I think you kind of hit on this too. If you've got a client that's looking at implementing the tool, that false sense of security, kind of that responsibility is on us sometimes as service providers to make sure they don't have that. Like, this is not, and I think this is where like services and technology companies probably differ a little bit, right? Because the technology, you product companies, you guys want to give the silver bullet. Like, here, no, all you need is this thing. That's it.
Yep.
And unless you're partnered with a service provider who can, add some value and services onto it. But as somebody selling services, and hey, the kit's part of it. You don't want your client to be like, well, you told me this is good to go. Like, I can just, check the box. And if you're just checking the box, a lot of times the technology isn't even, like, the technology is not going to check the box. You can just lie and check the box anyway, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and most of the time you don't work with an MSSP to just check the box.
Yeah.
You're kind of setting yourself up for failure in that way. Regulatory requirements are catching up to the industry. It used to be that to gain PCI compliance, you had to have a scanning antivirus tool, right? And that remained the same well into the time where antivirus and endpoint matured and changed to detect behavioral based problems. And so, regulations are now going beyond the check the box options, right? Do you have somebody monitoring your logs, configuring them, and responding to them instead of, does somebody have access to logs 24/7? Right. So, things are changing. And with all of the additional privacy rules that have come out from, different countries, different states are now doing them. Companies are slowly being dragged into the future of taking their cybersecurity seriously. I still run into people that think security by obscurity is a good way to be, though. It's still out there where, I still run across companies now and then that don't have an endpoint protection solution. If I were doing the top 5 basics, it's endpoint protection, it's firewall, unless you're remote, but even then you need some sort of virtual firewall technology. It's email security, and it's endpoint sorry, I'm losing what I'm trying to say here. Zero trust, protection, network protection for your devices. And so but you need to go beyond that. So many companies, though, especially small businesses, they're out there, they can't find tools that they can afford because these tools are, sold at, well, you have to buy a minimum of 100 licenses, right? They have a really hard time finding even service providers that will work for them. And small businesses have just as valuable data as enterprises do. So it's a tough solution, a tough problem to solve for many companies still.
Yeah, it's a big struggle, and I've worked across all markets from enterprise, Fortune 50, all the way down to like small mom and pops, and it like, I know what I think is expensive, but it depends. It's always like the market I'm talking, the market you're talking to, and it's like, well, and sometimes there are cheaper solutions, but they don't always deliver. And everybody that's creating technology today, they're targeting the enterprise space because that's where they can get their, that's where they can, blow up an ICP or
right.
or get bought out or whatnot and make all their money. But and then the small market's huge. And like you said, the obscurity thing I think is also interesting because, you know, we're working in security. We understand all of that. I think it's on us as providers to talk to those organizations and let them understand, you know, most of the time, if, you know, when Lockheed Martin or Boeing gets hacked, it's not because somebody went directly at them. It's because they went to this little provider and this little provider, and then, and they don't realize that. And that's, and it's something good for salespeople to understand too, I think so.
Sure. Well, I mean, we talked about the Target breach a minute ago, right? That was exactly how that happened. You know, they gained entry to the system by attacking their HVAC provider.
Right.
And, you know, that HVAC provider is probably a pretty mom and pop shop, right? You know, receptionist got a phishing email and fell for it. And, you know, there was very little to no cybersecurity within that HVAC provider's environment. And especially back then, I think this was 2013 roughly. You know, cybersecurity was still in its infancy. It existed, but it was nowhere near where it is today, where the majority of people know they should do it. You know, picking the right tools, even when you're in that situation, is really difficult because there's an overwhelming number of tools available, and all of them have great marketing teams, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, all of them are going to solve all of your problems. Many tools are designed to have an one-stop shop model where you know, platformization has been a big thing in the past 5 years or so with tools where, you know, you can have one agent and it's your firewall and your email and your endpoint and your vulnerability management and everything all in one, which is nice in some ways. You know, being able to configure something once is great, but I typically want to work with the tool that is best in class for that job. You know, for vulnerability management, I want to make sure I'm working with a really good tool for vulnerability management. Even if Microsoft can do it, Microsoft isn't a vulnerability management company, right? And same with email security even. You know, I generally recommend using an external solution for email security that's not part of your email provider's stack of tools. Even if it comes with it, you know, somebody that has focused only on that is going to be better at it. And then, of course, you've got to have people behind those tools. Because,
100%.
you know, managing Proofpoint, it's not plug and play. It's not, you know, it's not something, it takes a lot of care and feeding and, you know, ongoing management in order to continue working.
I don't think anything we have in our industry is actually plug and play. And anybody that tries to sell the easy
it's
button,
rare.
Yeah. The only way it's plug and play is if it comes with an expert who knows. Like, here's your tool and here's Tom to run it for you. And it's all in a nice package, which I guess is really what we're doing here. So Jen, it's been awesome talking to you. I could keep chatting forever, but where can everybody find you on the interwebs if they want to?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at legatosecurity.com. That is the company I founded, which I talk to our clients and customers and prospects all the time. I love staying involved in these conversations and love helping people align what they need so that we can ultimately provide benefit to them. You know, we're not an MSSP that's just going to fill your inbox with tickets. We're going to come in and extend your team and provide support wherever needed. So legatosecurity.com. Our email is on that site as well, but reach out to us and reach out to me on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn.
Outstanding. Thanks, Jen. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thanks for enjoying Keyboard Samurai Podcast. If you'd like to engage, find Will on LinkedIn at /WillClue or visit at willclue.me. That's WILKLU.me for more info. Disconnecting now. Synac you later.